learn things and read many books. Meaningless, doesn't matter. Let's move on. Wealth, power, meaningless. Enjoy your food, enjoy your drink, enjoy the work you have to do. These are God's gifts. That's what Ecclesiastes tells us. How does that fit? How can you read that and be like, okay, well, this is biblical, this is something we're supposed to be hearing, and pair that with, look, I'm doing a new thing, when over and over, multiple times, the author of Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. The days go on as they always have. Okay? Now here's a little spoiler alert for you. I'm not going to answer that question, and I'm not going to show how they fit together. For a couple of reasons. Partly, I'm not completely sure yet. And secondly, I feel like it's a good discussion question. So as you're listening today, think about that context, right? Think about, because I'm going to be the voice for the new today. I'm going to be the voice that says the new is coming and can come. So as I'm talking today, think about maybe how that fits with Ecclesiastes. That'd be a fun thing to talk about in breakouts. Oh, and that's just a reminder. Remember, breakouts are now centered around the questions that we come up with by listening. So think about things you'd like to ask. Think about things you'd like to discuss. Think about things that you think I'm saying are stupid or things you think they're the greatest thing I've ever said. Both of those make for great discussion questions. Take notes. The bulletins now have a place that says notes, and you can write on it. Be perfect. Okay. Novelty. Newness. Is it possible? Because I do agree with the author of Ecclesiastes a lot of times, Things go on like they always have, day after day, same old, same old. This week, current events, the rioting in Charlottesville, and you think, are you kidding me? We're still doing this? Really? Yeah, really. Really. Just like we did 3, 4, 10, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years ago. Where's the new? Where's the novel? Let's look at Genesis. A book of beginnings. A book of new things happening. Is the book just absurd? Or can we expect something? Have you ever noticed in Genesis how many times the same story appears? The same general narrative structures appear time and time again, either with the same characters or with different characters. For instance, in Genesis chapter 12, Abraham is traveling to Egypt. And the Egyptians notice that his wife Sarah is really attractive. So the Pharaoh calls for her. He's going to add her to his harem. And Abraham doesn't want any trouble, and he doesn't want to be killed on account of his wife. So he says, tell them you're my sister, so they don't kill me to steal you. So they do that. And then Pharaoh ends up contracting something from the encounter. There's probably a lesson there. And so he sends them both away. And you would think, okay, well, that's kind of a weird story. But then in chapter 20, right, Abraham and Sarah are now traveling in Canaan in the region of the Philistines, and their leader, whose title is Abimelech, he fancies Sarah as well. She's very fetching. And Abraham and Sarah do the same thing again. They say, okay, let's do the whole sister thing, right? Tell them you're my sister and everything will be okay. This time God warns Abimelech and says, hey, if you do this, you're going to get this disease, right? Pharaoh, it happened to Pharaoh. You don't want it. You don't want it. So he says, Abraham, my whole country could have been filled with this. Why would you try to destroy us? Get out of here. And take some camels with you. He gives them money for some reason. And then, in Genesis chapter 26, Abraham's son Isaac, the one through whom the promise was going to come, the one that he was going to sacrifice. Remember those stories we talked about? Isaac and his wife Rebekah are in the same area of the Philistines. This time, presumably, a new Abimelech is in power. But he wants Rebekah as his wife. This keeps happening, right? And so what do? Hey, Rebekah, my dad did this thing this one time. Pretty cool idea. Just tell them you're my sister and we'll be okay. It's crazy. 3 times this story happens. And then what about all the stories of the deceit against family members? Most of Genesis, starting at Abraham and then going to the end where Joseph occurs, is kind of like Real Housewives of the ancient Near East. It's just filled with drama and like people going behind people's backs and cheating each other and trying to get ahead. There's so much drama, it's unbelievable. In chapter 25, we see Isaac and his son Jacob, who's the younger brother to the first son Esau. Jacob tricks his older brother Esau into selling his inheritance for a bowl of soup. Then, in chapter 27, Jacob tricks Esau again and tricks his father Jacob to get the blessing, the sending outness into the world, the good vibes from his father. He totally just cheats his brother. I don't know the right term for that. I have one, but he totally just just takes him for a ride. Poor Esau. Then in chapter 28, right, so just a little bit later, Jacob agrees to work for his uncle, Laban, for 7 years in order to marry his uncle's daughter. Yes, his cousin, whose name is Rachel. There's a lot of marrying cousins in Genesis. It's very interesting. But he gets tricked by Laban, his future father-in-law uncle, and gives Jacob the other daughter, Leah, to marry. Well, he really wants to marry Rachel still, so he works another 7 years, and now he's married to both wives. In chapter 30, Jacob's living with Rachel and Leah's family, Laban, his uncle, father-in-law, and Jacob really makes a bad deal with Laban, to the point where Laban ends up dry, he just dries up his resources, and Jacob's extremely wealthy. Again, just taking people for a ride, just like he did to Esau. It gets to the point where Laban's servants say, hey, we're poor now. You know that, right? We're poor, and he's rich, and he did that to you. And so they send them away. And then Rachel steals all the family gods and the idols from her father Laban. It's just one thing after another of stealing from each other, lying to each other, trying to take things from each other. Well, then Jacob has a whirlwind tour of familial creativity, and he ends up bearing 12 sons by 4 wives. And they have all kinds of fun adventures, like the time when the sons avenge their sister's rape by killing all the males in a town and then capturing all the women and children. But fast forward, right, to chapter 37, and one of Jacob's 12 sons is named Joseph. Joseph came from Rachel, the favorite wife, the one that he wanted to work for and ended up working 14 years to marry. Joseph is from Rachel. All the other sons from the other 3 wives hate Joseph. They're jealous of him. So they sell him into slavery, and they lie to their father, Jacob, telling him Joseph died. Then in chapter 38, Jacob's son Judah gets tricked by his widowed daughter-in-law into impregnating her, and she does this by pretending to be a prostitute. Got it? That kind of sums up the last parts of Genesis. It's quite a story. And I want to put it out there like this, with this bird's eye view, 35,000 feet. Because there's some things that happen over and over, these recurring things, that when we draw our attention to them, we can see, oh, there's a flow here that teaches us something bigger and better about the world. This weird, mysterious occurrence of God's promise. So when you follow the storylines, it's all the same. Deceit, drama, killing, all in an attempt to do the same thing, get more wealth, get more status in the region, have more children, become more influential, and more powerful. It's a grasping, a greedy grasping at a meaningless life, to borrow from Ecclesiastes. And it works. By the time we get to the end of Genesis, these people that came from Abraham and then Isaac and then came from Jacob are so numerous, they're living in Egypt, that the Egyptians are worried that they may actually have the power to rise up and take over the government. So they had a lot of kids, and they were very influential. But here's the thing. There's a really big theme in Genesis besides deceit, besides drama. It's a theme that kind of haunts all these stories, takes up less space in the text than some of the other themes, but occurs over and over. It's this theme of barrenness. It starts with Sarah. She's unable to bear children. These three messengers come to Abraham, one of whom is said to be God, and God says to him, in a year from now, 1 year from now, your wife will have a child. Sarah's listening outside. She's like doing one of these through the tent. And when she hears that, she laughs. It's so unexpected. It's so surprising that she just chuckles. I think you know what that's like. When you're in a situation you weren't expecting, your only reaction is to laugh. You're nervous. God says, why did you laugh? Is anything too hard for me? I know you're old. I know you're barren. Not a good combo for having a child. But is anything too hard for me? Here's the thing before we move on. Sarah's laugh is perfectly in line with this news, isn't it? It's a normal reaction to hearing news like that, to hearing something that's so outside of the ordinary and so unexpected and so absurd, really. Something totally out of place can be really hilarious. That's comedy, isn't it? It's all about the delivery, when you do it, when you say it. A perfectly placed pie in the face. So funny. Can something be that out of place? Can it really, though? Can something be that new? Can the new actually occur? Can an event occur which truly disrupts you? What would you laugh at today? If three messengers came to you, one of them said he was God, and told you something, what would it be that would make you laugh? In a year from now, you'll enjoy your job. In a year from now, your marriage won't be on the rocks. In a year from now, you won't have to worry about where you're going to get your next meal. In a year from now, your son Eldon will not destroy everything in your home. Right? I mean, that's not going to happen. None of you believe it. You don't believe it's possible. Whatever it is, we all have something we would laugh at. Something that we think is absurd. That if a messenger came and gave it to us, we'd be like, okay, good one. You don't know the situation. Well, Sarah likes the prospect of having a child. She thinks like it sounds good to her, of course, right? Influence, power. So she tells Abraham to take her handmaid and have a child by her. So he takes her as his second wife, and she delivers him a child. Good job, Sarah. You did it. You were given the message, you had a plan, and you executed. But we find out, nope, that wasn't the way it was supposed to happen. Sarah herself was actually supposed to have a child. Well, Sarah ends up booting out the other wife and the kid because, again, Real Housewives of ancient Near East. And she has her own son, little baby Isaac. And he grows up and gets himself a wife named Rebecca. And guess what? Rebecca's also barren. That's weird, isn't it? 2 generations now. So the text says that Isaac prays to God and says, please give my wife a child. So he does. Twin boys. And in this first unexpected pregnancy, there's an unexpected promise that the younger one will serve the older one. That's topsy-turvy. Doesn't make any sense. But that's the promise. Well, Jacob grows up, and as I said, tricks Esau out of a bunch of stuff, tricks Isaac, and gets himself 4 wives. Now, part of the reason for this, and this is really interesting, why Jacob even ends up having 4 wives is because Rachel, the wife he intended to first marry, his first love, the wife of his youth, is barren. Again, so we have Sarah cannot bear a child, Rebecca cannot bear a child, Rachel cannot bear children. How is this the line of promise? How is this line the line that was promised, through you I will make a great nation? Your descendants will be numerous. How can descendants be numerous when you have 3 barren women in a row? So Rachel says, look, I can't have children. Take my handmaiden and have children by her. So Jacob does that. Well, Jacob's other wife, Leah, she doesn't like this. She's already born children, and she wants to keep that kind of power to herself. So she's like, well, then take my servant and have children by her too. So now he's got the 4 wives, and now they're all having children. Rachel ends up having 2 sons. Again, not in the same way as the other 3 wives. It's a special thing. It says the Lord gave her these sons, Joseph and Benjamin. So now we have 3 generations of barrenness and 4 generations of special children. This son, Joseph, as I mentioned earlier, he makes his way, or he rather has his way made for him, to Egypt as a slave. And through a whole series of topsy-turvy events, becomes vice pharaoh. Started at the bottom, now he's here, right? He's like the quintessential upward mobility story. He starts as a slave, he goes to prison for being falsely accused by his slave's wife, and then in the prison he makes some friends that say they're going to help him. They don't end up helping him. One end up like remembering him later and helps him, and so then he gets out. He interprets a dream for Pharaoh. He shows Pharaoh some really great business savvy. There ends up being a famine in the land that's so bad that the whole region has nothing to eat. The drought and the famine are so bad. But Egypt, because of Joseph's prowess, because of his intellectual abilities, because of his ability to connive, right? He's Jacob's son. The apple does not fall far in this story. Ends up showing Pharaoh this way that they can collect food over the years, right? In these massive storehouses, and then they can price gouge it to the other countries and even their own people. They actually charge their own people back for the food that those people grew. It's a brilliant business model if you want to make a ton of money. So they have all the resources in the area, and Joseph's wealthy beyond measure. He takes himself a wife from Egypt. He has children. It's a great story. Well, Jacob, who's still alive at this point, his father, who all these years thinks Joseph's dead and gone and killed by an animal, says to his other sons, the ones who, sent Joseph into slavery, go to Egypt and buy some food because we're going to die if you don't. Just like all the other countries had to do, they were all going to Egypt. So the brothers go to Egypt and they meet Joseph, who at this point, he's probably wearing that white skirt thing and the tall hat. He's probably carrying some staff with the pagan symbol on top, and he's got the eyeliner on that you see in the drawings, the hieroglyphics. He's totally Egyptian at this point. I always picture just probably shaved his chest too. He's got the big six-pack, just the classic Pharaoh look. So of course his brothers don't recognize him at all because they're in the robes and the headdress and they look like Hebrews and he looks like an Egyptian. They can't see it. They don't know it's Joseph. So he gives them a hard time, plays some tricks on them, gets them back a little bit. Nothing major. But at the end, he finally reveals himself to his brothers. And they're scared to death, of course, that he's going to kill them. But he's like, no, I forgive you. I forgive you. And his father comes, and they're reunited, and it's just this beautiful time of a father regaining his lost son back. And the family lives happily ever after for a decent amount of time in Egypt. But Joseph says something in that moment when he reveals himself to his brothers. He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what's being done right here, the saving of many lives. Don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children. He reassured them and spoke kindly to them. So think about this. No Isaac from barren Sarah. Then there would have been no Jacob from barren Rebekah. And Jacob seems to be the one to reverse this thing, right? He hedges his bets with the 4 wives. But if it wasn't for Joseph, the son from the barren wife, none of it would have mattered. You can have 12 children, and they can have a lot of children. But if drought and famine wipe you out, it's over. How vulgar is that? It's just so plain and earthy and ugly, like this family emerging and all this conniving and deceit, and then oh, no rain. Doesn't matter. You're at the mercy of the crops. That's how life is. There's unexpected. There's pain and suffering and destruction and drought and famine. But what's so beautiful about this story, and what's so important, that all of these women were barren. The line that actually preserved everybody else. The line that got to save not just their own people, but the world, essentially. is that each of these was unexpected, new, something surprising, something no one would have ever thought would happen. It's only through the unexpected, the radically indiscernible, the seemingly impossible, the completely laughable, the utterly surprising, the brand new movement of God, that any of it made any sense at all. None of the stories would have had any meaning without the new emerging. Out of no life comes life. Out of the void comes light. Out of barrenness comes children. The theme of Genesis over and over and over is from nothing comes something. That's why we see all the weird, terrible stories. Do you see why they're so important? Why you have to have all this drama. Why you have to have all of the destruction, all the deceit, all the lying. Because without them, you wouldn't see the life and the beauty. Without all the tricks and the business as usual, you wouldn't be able to see the new emerging. You wouldn't be able to see God moving. This is the lesson over and over in Genesis, and it's the lesson for us. Out of the nothingness comes something. There's nothingness for you right now. As I said, all of us have something we would laugh at. All of us have something that we would never expect to happen. But I want to tell you that new things can happen in your life. No matter what age you are. If you're 30 or 80 or 90 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, 60, whatever age you are, life is not so meaningless and so purposeless that new and beautiful things cannot emerge from them. I want you to sit and think about the thing in your life that you think could never change and what it would look like for it to change. I want you to sit and think about the way that the world around you looks same and vulgar and meaningless, and to think about the ways that it can change. Because God is moving, absolutely is moving. But it's only out of the drama, the deceit, the meaninglessness, the purposelessness, the pain, the barrenness. The children come from the barrenness. Life comes after death. Resurrection is possible. So embrace that message today. Don't get beat down with cynicism. It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to just fall into this place where we don't want to do anything. We don't want to put any effort into good, into changing ourselves or changing others or changing the world around us. Because all we ever see is the barrenness. But hold on to the hope. Cling on to the hope that life can come from the barren. Let's pray. God, you are the movement of the new. The event we never saw coming, the surprise, the unexpected, the laughable, the absurd, the thing that we could never wrap our minds around. Help us to just embrace the new and chase it and not become so beaten down with cynicism when we think the world is just the same. Bind us together in that hope. Amen. Go in peace. Expect something unexpected. You're dismissed.